Everyone. How does our brain react on love and sex when we are married? We will explore this fascinating topic with Dr. Bianca, a social neuroscientist whose research focuses on the neural basis of attachment, caregiving, and mind body interventions. Dr. Bianca was awarded the 2012 International Women in Science Award for her research in neuroimaging studies of long-term pair bonding in humans. I am Amita from Nourish Doc, a global platform for natural and holistic therapies. I would like to introduce all of our viewers to Dr. Bianca, who joins us from UC Santa Barbara, California. Welcome, Dr. Bianca.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This is such a fascinating topic. I think everyone wants to know how the brain goes different, in love and sex. So let's get started. All right. Would you like to start your talk, Dr. Bianca?
Hi. Well, thank you everyone for joining me. I'm happy to be here. I really appreciate Amita's cause and wellness in general. I've devoted a lot of my research to examining the neural and behavioral correlates of romantic love and related topics like empathy and attachment and altruism in marriages. I also study a trait called sensory processing sensitivity. And also, in addition to practicing yoga and meditation, I've taken up examining how it helps to support couples, especially those that are caring for others. But in this talk, I'm mainly going to be focusing on love and other important factors related to love in marriages. So psychologists in recent decades have started to examine romantic love, and very well accepted definition is that romantic love is a state of intense longing for union with another individual. And it's not just physical union. So a lot of times people think about wanting to be with a person, but this union also involves other important things like emotional union and spiritual union. So wanting to know about the person, wanting to know about their feelings, wanting to know about their inner life and world. And also being connected with them in a deep and meaningful way beyond just physical union. Other work has started to examine, how prevalent is love, and love is universal. It appears in nearly every around the planet in nearly all human societies. And other sciences have started to define the biological basis of romantic love. What functions does it serve for us in evolutionary terms? And they suggest that love is a strategy that helps us to raise offspring together and to stay together long enough to care for each other through life. So in some species, we do see lifelong partnerships. And biologists have started to delineate, like, what exactly is this? What does it mean to be a couple? What does it mean to pair bond? And what they observe is that when animals form pair bonds, they tend to engage in certain behaviors together. So they tend to nest together, travel together, groom, play, raise offspring. Some of them express aggression towards intruders. And they differentiate between those kinds of couples. So couples that are what is known as socially monogamous. So they form a pair bond, it's stable, they engage in all these behaviors together. But for some of them, in most species, they go off and they mate with other individuals. So when couples reserve sexual behavior only for the pair bond partner, that's known as sexual monogamy. And sexual monogamy is much more rare in humans and, not in humans, but across species other than humans. And in addition to serving these important biological and evolutionary functions, romantic love also serves a variety of functions for our well-being. So it's been shown to be associated with psychological well-being, life satisfaction, and self-esteem, a variety of other important health indicators like cardiovascular function, endocrine function, and immune function. And it also has important implications for relationships. So in the West, many people enter and stay married for reasons like romantic love. And some couples even report that not being in love with their partner is enough to seek divorce, like to want to terminate a marriage. However, interestingly, divorce rates are similar in Western marriages, where in modern times a lot of people get married because they're in love with their partner, versus in the East, where arranged marriages are prevalent. And divorce rates, surprisingly, are similar in the East and the West. Romantic love also helps people to, in addition to staying together, to stay happy and satisfied in their marriages. And it also promotes fidelity. So laboratory studies have been done where people are shown images of attractive individuals, and those that are in love show less attention to alternative partners, and also report lower rates of infidelity. And although love serves all these important biological and well-being functions, people have been really skeptical about the possibility that love can last. So, in the media, we tend to see reports of failed marriages. Most people don't really believe that love can, that people can stay married and in love over time. And even Freud, back in the 50s, suggested that the existence of love in a marriage, in a long-term marriage, could be an indication of pathology. So people have really been skeptics of the possibility that intense love with engagement, excitement, sexual desire could exist in couples that have been married for past the child rearing years. So researchers have started to study this and try to understand what's going on. If some couples do report that love can last, why is there so much skepticism? And indeed, some studies show that romantic love was less popular in relationships, but when we started to parse out the items that are related to obsession, we realized that the pattern was really different. So in other words, a lot of the scales that were developed with adolescents, and these adolescents report things like infatuation, emotional roller coasters, not being able to eat if their partner doesn't call them, having emotional highs and lows, being really uncertain about their relationships. And these items were included in the conceptualization of romantic love and measured in couples that were in stable and long-term marriages. And what I found when I set off to understand whether love could last was that when I interviewed couples that had been married for a long time or raising children or had raised their children, is that they weren't reporting obsession with their partner. They were certain about their partner's love and that the relationship was a happy and healthy relationship. So they weren't experiencing those emotional highs and lows and the pining and the uncertainty and the, not being able to sleep and not knowing if the person loves them back. What they were experiencing was the intensity and engagement and sexual desire for their partner. So they still, were excited to know that the partner was coming home, and thought about what they could do together and planning activities together and thought about them throughout the day and created meaningful experiences with them, but they weren't experiencing that uncertainty and obsession that people often experience in the early stages of relationships. So what the research shows that when we parse out that obsession component in a variety of studies over the past few decades, romantic love did appear at high levels in long-term relationships. To see, okay, well, if we just get a random sample of individuals, what do they report? And at Stony Brook University, we did a random digit dialing study of people in New York State and people around the United States. And indeed, we found that when people married 10 years or more were asked about their levels of love for their partner. Around the US, about 40% of them reported really high levels of romantic love. In New York, it was slightly lower, I think, at about 30% or so. And in Spain, another group examined this question, and they found that in couples married 30 years or more, about 11% of them were reporting really high levels of romantic love. So we have some good self-report evidence, right? So we're asking people, how in love are you with your partner? We ask them a variety of questions. And there's some couples, the ones that stay together for at least a good minority of them, anywhere between 11 to 40% of them, they're still reporting high levels of romantic love. And so now we've started to also look at the biology of love and pair bonding. And a lot of the work in humans was based on work with rodent mammals. So these adorable little rodents that lend themselves to studying pair bonding because there are some species that are monogamous, so they engage in all the behaviors that I described earlier. They form nests, they travel together, they groom, they share food, they raise offspring, and then in a very almost an identical mammal, the species that's promiscuous, they don't form pair bonds. So these adorable little rodents have been really, really seminal in helping us understand the biology of pair bonding. And scientists have started to discover what are some of the key neural and hormonal and even genetic correlates of pair bonding. So one area that I'm going to focus on today, there are several areas that are important for attachment and pair bonding, but one area that has been really identified as being a key player in pair bonding is the ventral pallidum. And this area of the brain is rich in oxytocin, which many of you may have heard of because it's been very popular in terms of being called the love hormone or the moral molecule, or people have been using it to spray, intranasal spray, to engage in more social behaviors. It's been used for treating autism, to help people to be more social, and also to help couples in their romantic relationships. So this area of the brain is rich in oxytocin receptors. It's also rich in vasopressin receptors, which is important for a variety of different functions like water regulation in the body. And in humans, we've also started to examine the neural correlates of romantic love. So one popular paradigm that my colleagues and I have used is showing people face images of their partner while they're being scanned with functional MRI. So functional MRI measures blood flow in the brain. And this blood flow is interpreted as measuring activation. So areas that are getting more oxygen are believed to be more active during a task or even at rest. So what we have done is we have, in a variety of different studies, shown individuals images of their partner's face and familiar neutral friend or somebody that they weren't that familiar with. And we chose this protocol of showing individuals' face images because in experimental studies, people were assessed for what stimulus would be the strongest for evoking feelings of love. So they were shown, they were provided with auditory stimuli, they were provided with sense, and what evoked the strongest love response was the face image. So that's what we have been using in our protocols. And so they're shown alternating images of their partner, followed by a large number. And this large number, when they're in the scanner, they're asked to count backwards in their brain, in their head, not out loud, to count backwards by sevens. And it's not important for them to get it right or wrong, that they're really focusing on doing something that's somewhat challenging so that it washes away any emotional effect, washes away any kind of thoughts or emotions related to that. So across all these different studies of showing individuals a face image of the partner, in addition in other labs around the globe, so in the UK and in China, and looking at both homosexual and heterosexual relationships, and even couples that aren't necessarily extremely happy or in love in their relationships. What is observed is activation of the ventral tegmental area of the brain. And this area of the brain is a key reward region of our brain that's rich in dopamine receptors. And dopamine is important for motivation. So it's what signals to us to go out and work for something, whether we like it or we don't. So it helps us to, yeah.
I'm sorry. So these are brain images that you did when you did the study. I mean, it's fascinating that the way you were explaining is the early stage romantic love, how the dopamine and how the VTA sensory images change if someone is not in love. Is that what the analysis would be from this?
Well, these are images of the brain response to the partner.
Okay.
Versus the highly familiar neutral acquaintance. So when people are shown an image of their partner, and we look at that in comparison to how their brain is responding to the familiar neutral acquaintance, these are the areas that are more active. And across all these different studies, now, to date, it could probably be a dozen different studies that have measured romantic love in a variety of different ways. The way that I've explained here is that we tend to show people face images of the partner. So the brain responses to the face of the partner. But in other studies, they've done priming where they're provided with words related to their partner versus other things they may be passionate about. And studies around the globe have looked at romantic love in a variety of different settings. So they've looked at contrasting the response to a romantic partner versus a child. Here we've contrasted it in response to the partner versus a familiar neutral acquaintance. Other labs have looked at other relationship stages and both homosexual and heterosexual relationships. And what has emerged from this last decade or so, maybe now it's coming up on 2 decades, is that the ventral tegmental area, which is the key center of the brain that's rich in dopamine, is always seen in these various different studies.
That's fascinating. Okay, yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. The newlyweds show VTA activation to the partner face images, as you explained earlier in that.
Yeah, so the VTA, so in the newlywed study, what we did was we looked at the brain response to the partner around the time of the wedding and then a year later. And at both time points, if individuals were in love, they or reported romantic love for their partner, they showed activation in the VTA. Also, one of the very first studies, actually the second study to measure romantic love in the brain, looked at early stage romantic love. So those individuals were together about 6 months on average. So imagine like the 6 months of their relationship. They're brought, they're together 6 months. They're brought into the scanner, and they're shown images of the person that they're dating, practically. And this study was done back in 2005, and these people, if they reported being in love, they showed activation in the VTA. We also see it in individuals in long-term romantic love. So people together like 25 years on average are showing activation in this area as well. But what's really interesting is that people who are together for, say, 25 years show activation in the VTA, but they also show much more activation than the people in early stage romantic love. So, like a lot more of their brain is being activated when they see an image of their partner. And, we've thought about this some, like, why would we be seeing a more robust pattern of results for a long-term partner than for somebody we've recently fallen in love with? And it's because it's, the partner calls upon many more memories, many more events. It just becomes more complicated. We see more activity as the relationships progress.
That's fascinating, though. So this is what you're talking about, right?
Yes, exactly. So we also see, in addition to the ventral tegmental area, we also see activation in the ventral pallidum region. So the ventral pallidum that's seen in the rodent mammals to be important for their pair bonding behaviors and for their pair bonds to just become established. The ones that aren't showing the differences in these areas. So the chemicals aren't being released, and they don't necessarily have a lot of receptors for oxytocin and vasopressin in these regions, don't form pair bonds. So they mate and then they go off on their way. The ones that are rich in receptors for these various hormones are the ones that form the pair bonds. They mate and then they stay together. And some of them stay together for a while. They raise babies together. They do all sorts of things. So in humans, we also see those that are in pair bonds, both in long-term pair bonds and in newlywed pair bonds, activation of the ventral pallidum that is observed in rodent mammals that create monogamous pair bonds.
Okay. All right. So it's interesting, very interesting theory. Did you do any scanning on people who were getting divorced or something, or how their brain was working on the dopamine? That would be very interesting question.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. We have not studied individuals going through a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't. My team hasn't. We've been focusing on romantic love and
not the unromantic.
But
okay.
We could do that kind of a study, and it would be interesting to think about whether these key areas of the brain would be showing activation, because the ventral tegmental area is seen in individuals when they're in love, but also it's not an area that necessarily responds to things that we like. So it doesn't matter if we like it or not. It matters that we want it and that we're willing to work for it, because it's an area that's associated with working for rewards. It's part of our survival system. So it helps us to look for food and find it, look for water and find it. And then it's also been conserved for things like pair bonding and hijacked for other substances that may be rewarding, like secondary substances like monetary gains or playing video games or substances also get activated in response to these different stimuli. So, for example, cocaine is one thing that stimulates the ventral tegmental area. Winning something or thinking you're going to win it, and interestingly, people don't necessarily need to like the stimulus; they just need to be willing to work for it and want it.
Yeah.
Other areas of the brain are more responsive to actually liking things and finding them pleasant. So the pleasantness and the wanting is not, is not the same thing. And researchers have been thinking about this and proposing theories about these different processes and what areas of the brain get evoked in response to either wanting something or liking something. And we also see these differentiations for romantic love. So for example, we see the VTA in response to feelings of romantic love for a partner, but differently when we ask people about their friendship with their partner. So they're asked a variety of questions about enjoying the partner's company and enjoying companionship with them. And those measures of friendship are related to other regions of the brain, not necessarily the ventral tegmental area, but like the globus pallidus and the ventral pallidum, which we think are more of the attachment related, are tapping into the attachment related processes rather than the romantic love. So now we're starting to differentiate across these different functions.
Yeah. And how does the gene come into play that you are trying to explain here, the different genes that are associated with empathy and social behavior?
Yeah, so we've also looked at other important factors related to love. So we've examined 3 different types of genes and that are critical for social behaviors: an oxytocin variant, a vasopressin variant, and a dopamine variant that I'm not discussing in this presentation.
Sure.
And what we found is that these genes that are important for general social behaviors and pair bonding are also mediating the brain response in a variety of different relationship functions. So we see that people who are reporting higher levels of romantic love show more activation in the ventral tegmental area, and that affects, so that the activation in that key reward region of the brain is amplified for individuals that have particular variants of these genes, of the oxytocin and the vasopressin genes. In addition, we've looked at sexual satisfaction. So individuals that are reporting that they're sexually satisfied in their marriages also show more activation in these key areas, like the ventral pallidum of the brain. And these effects are even stronger for individuals with these particular variants. So those that are associated with more social behaviors and pair bonding show even stronger effects.
Okay, yeah, you just talked about that. The sex satisfaction is correlated. Yeah. Okay, should I move forward, or you want to mention a little bit about this, or you just talked about this, right?
I just talked about this. So again, here we're illustrating how individuals' sex satisfaction is related to their brain activation in the ventral pallidum, but in addition, it evoked activation in a variety of other key reward centers, like the globus pallidus that I mentioned before as being associated with liking things, the ventral tegmental area rich in dopamine, and other cortical regions.
Yeah. Okay.
So interestingly, for the newlywed study, we also looked at how individuals' brains responded to their partners, both around the time of their wedding and around 1 year later. And what we saw was that individuals who showed stronger activation in the ventral tegmental area of their brain showed increases in their romantic love scores over the first year of marriage. So how strong the activity was at around the time of their wedding predicted whether their love would go up over the first year of marriage. Interestingly, also at time 2, so about 1 year later, those that showed more ventral tegmental area activity also were, again, showing that same pattern of results. So the increases in romantic love were associated both with the activity in the VTA at baseline and even 1 year later. But these effects were amplified for individuals with the oxytocin and the vasopressin gene variants.
Okay. So
and more recent.
Yeah, this is very interesting on the altruism. So that's interesting too.
Yes, and we've, we named this paper Beyond Romance. So, we've started to think about other important things that keep couples together, like sacrificing for the partner, putting the partner's happiness in front of our own. And indeed, when people were asked, going back to the large random digit dialing studies, when they were asked the kinds of behaviors that they were engaging in, what we found was that those that reported thinking positively about their partner were also reporting more romantic love. So thinking positive thoughts about the partner, wanting to do things to make them happy, are important for maintaining love. And altruism is related to that. So wanting to do things that make the partner happy, that serve the partner, wanting their life to be better, caring about them, all of this is really important, and partly what is thought to be one of the reasons that romantic love might be conserved for humans that sustain it over time in their marriages, is that it serves the function of keeping people together and caring for each other beyond reproduction and raising offspring. And again, what we see is that the tendency to put the partner's needs before our own, so to have altruistic tendencies, when people are shown images of their partner in various emotional states. So they're told your partner is feeling really sad because something terrible has happened to them. Or even when they're told your partner is feeling really happy because something wonderful has happened to them. And then we correlate their altruism scores with their brain activation in these various different scenarios. And what we found was that individuals who reported more altruism for their partner showed more activation in the ventral pallidum of their brain that's associated with pair bonding and attachment behaviors. But also, again, that these effects were amplified for individuals with the particular oxytocin and vasopressin gene variants.
Okay, so how would you summarize this for our viewers?
Yeah, so so I think it's one of the a few key things to take away from this talk is that romantic love is important. It serves various different functions. It serves the functions of bringing couples together to raise offspring together, to have long-term companionship and care for each other, and that it's important for establishing a relationship and maintaining it, for staying happy in a relationship. It promotes fidelity, and it also promotes well-being. So people who report being in love with their partners also show more self-esteem, better psychological well-being, and better indicators of health like cardiovascular and immune function and endocrine function. So we've established that romantic love is not only, something that philosophers talk about or that Hollywood talks about or that's in fairy tales, but that it serves important biological and health functions for humans and other species. And in recent decades, scientists have started to also understand what are the biological underpinnings. So one thing that we've wondered about is what is the nature of romantic love and whether love can last. And what we're finding is that love is complicated but simple. So it evokes a variety of responses in people. In the brain, it's associated with important and basic neural structures like the reward center of the brain. That's important for survival. But it also evokes activation in various cortical regions that are important for thinking and planning and meaning making, and things like empathy and well-being. And we see all of these functions that activation and regions that serve all of these functions in the brain. And in studies of people who are happily married and in love, we've also started to examine some of the genetic factors that may be playing a role in marriages. And particularly, we've examined romantic love, and we've examined empathy, we've examined sex, we've examined altruism. And what we're finding is that the pattern of results suggests that romantic love is tapping into the reward system of the brain and some of the other features of relationships that are important for its maintenance, like sex and altruism, are also tapping into the reward system, but they're also tapping into other things like the attachment system of the brain.
This is a fascinating topic, especially in COVID days. Your takeaway message would be that, love is natural, love is holistic, try to love each other, right? What would you tell couples? I was reading an article, and there was an article talking about divorce rates have soared, all over the world, because human beings, when they're, isolated from other social element, social well-being, and for some reason the divorce rates have soared. So what would your recommendation be for couples who are trying to stay together but finding it very difficult during this pandemic?
Well, I would recommend to them to try to work it out, especially during quarantine, because being alone is, seems like it could be easier, but it's not. It's not always good for our well-being, especially, you can really be there for each other. And that it's a perfect time for them to take the opportunity to try to master their relationships and the challenges that they're experiencing. But I understand that for some people, being together and enclosed and really having to live together, where maybe previously one partner was going out to work or traveling a lot, that now they're actually having to live together and experience every day together, that can really raise challenges. And indeed, there were some reports that after the first wave of COVID, of people being quarantined, after the quarantine, the divorce rate spiked, like in Wuhan and various other places in the world. And some couples were even stuck on cruise ships together And they manage to find ways to connect and to support each other through those challenges. So I think that that COVID and these times are a perfect opportunity for us to deepen our relationships with each other, because they call upon us to create smaller social circles and social networks in terms of physical proximity, but also to stay connected with our friends and our family via other mediums. And for many of us, having to slow down and not having to go to work and not having to spend time commuting and various different things have given us more, have all of a sudden, like, the world stopped, and it's created more space and time in our worlds to connect with each other. So I hope that people are, using this time wisely, because, we don't know how long this situation will last and what our new normal is going to look like. But it definitely has been an opportunity to connect in a different way and to realize how important our social connections are.
Absolutely. Any questions from viewers in Zoom? I see a few viewers, attendees in Zoom. If there are any questions, you can put them in chat window. If not, we have our email and website listed. You can send us the questions if you have for Dr. Bianca in an email that's listed here. Okay. With that, I would like to wrap up this talk. Thank you so much for being with us and giving us the increasing a dopamine level in our brains. I think we all need it. I love the way you said the reward system in the brain. It's like, you buy something and you get a reward, like, when you go, and we love that. And the same thing goes with our brains also. So that analogy is so beautiful, because our brain gets happy, when we get something that we want, and that happiness leads to better relationships. So that's an amazing thing. What the research, that the way you've shown is amazing. It's absolutely mind blowing. So with that, I'd like to thank you so much for being with us. And any final things, a final sentence from you, final line from you before I wrap up?
No, nothing. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you so much, and stay in love.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Bye-bye.